Salt water slammed into my face like crushed glass the second the glass canopy sheared away. 90 knots against the Pacific tore the cockpit apart, forcing black oil, engine grime, and salt water straight down my throat. I was trapped upside down in the churn of our sinking Devastator, fighting the collapsing aluminum frame while my heavy canvas harness straps bit into my collarbone. The sea rose fast past my chest, heavy, dark, and suffocating inside my khaki flight suit. My fingers scraped blindly across the jammed quick-release buckle, slick with high-octane engine fuel and salt water. Somewhere above, muffled through 30 feet of churning green water, the heavy thud of distant naval guns vibrated through my ribs like a dying heartbeat. My lungs burned against the crushing pressure as the plane dragged me down into the deep blue ocean. In the dark murk, I clawed my right hand into my pocket and ripped out my folding steel pocket knife. The knife slipped from my fingers once in the rushing current. I caught the handle again before it disappeared into the darkness. The wet canvas strap finally parted under the steel blade, and the weight of the sinking aircraft pulled my legs toward the seabed. I kicked upward with everything I had left, fighting toward the pale green light above. 4 hours earlier, there was no water, only the bitter stench of cold coffee, stale tobacco, and aviation fuel hanging thick in Ready Room 8 aboard the aircraft carrier USS Hornet. It was dawn on June 4th, 1942, and 30 men sat wedged in steel chairs beneath the yellow emergency lamps. My name is Ensign George Gay, but everyone on the flight deck called me Tex. Radio man Robert Huntington sat in the locker bay beside me, his knuckles pale as he fumbled with the friction buckles of his canvas life vest. Everyone called him Bob. He was young, barely old enough to hide how badly his hands were shaking. He touched the tip of his nose with a graphite-smudged finger, staring down at the steel deck plates with a quiet, pale face. The room smelled of damp woolen flight uniforms, stale sweat, and heavy machine oil. Outside the steel bulkhead, the elevator chains rattled continuously as grease-covered deck crews wrestled heavy ordnance across the lower hangar bay. Nobody in Ready Room 8 talked aloud about the target coordinates pinned to the corkboard. We all knew the distance to the enemy carriers was right at the outer margin of our fuel tanks, leaving zero margin for error, detour, or combat delay over the target. I shoved Bob's trembling fingers aside and yanked his vest straps tight with a rough tug. I told him if he could not handle a simple canvas buckle on the deck, he had no business riding the rear gun of a torpedo bomber in combat. He kept his mouth shut, but his eyes burned with quiet shame and determination. I reached into my left pocket, letting my fingers close around the small bronze nut I carried in my flight suit. It was cool, heavy, and solid against my calloused thumb. In a world of war and uncertainty, that piece of brass was the only thing that felt honest. Up on the wooden flight deck, the morning wind blew hard across the bow. 15 Douglas TBD Devastators sat tail to propeller, radial twin Wasp engines coughing blue exhaust fumes into the salt spray. Lieutenant Commander John Waldron stood on the wing root of AT-1, staring westward over the empty sea like a man who had already settled his account with God. He checked his silver pocket watch, snapped the cover shut, and looked each pilot straight in the eye. He didn't offer a dramatic speech. He just told us to hold formation no matter what happened in the sky, and that if only one plane got through the flak wall, that torpedo had to be delivered into the enemy flank. When the deck officer waved his yellow flag, I shoved the throttle forward with trembling hands. Our old Devastator groaned under the 2,000-pound Mark 13 torpedo slung beneath our belly, bumping down the wooden deck plates before clawing into the morning spray. 30 men and 15 Devastators were flying west across the open blue, forming up over the fleet with 15 corrugated wings shaking under the strain of heavy radial engines. Then the radio crackled with bad news. Our fighter escort had disappeared toward the horizon, leaving our sky completely bare. We were 15 heavy, defenseless torpedo bombers flying toward the main enemy fleet, alone. The intercom stayed silent as we pressed westward over the open blue ocean. Every man in those 15 cockpits knew our top speed with a torpedo was barely 100 knots, hardly fast enough to outrun a motorboat. If a single oil line cracked out here, in the empty deep, the Pacific would swallow us whole without leaving a trace. Below us, the water shifted from dark coastal blue to the deep blue of the open Pacific. We flew past scattered bank clouds, their gray shadows drifting across the rolling waves. Every few minutes, I looked back through the greenhouse glass at Bob in the rear gunner's seat. He was scanning the high clouds above, his pale hand resting firm on the spade grips of his twin machine guns. On both sides of our plane, Torpedo 8 held tight formation, lower than the cloud deck. I checked the feed tray on twin 30 caliber Browning machine guns in the rear cockpit, wiping salt mist off the firing pins with an oily rag. Down below our wings, there was nothing but endless whitecaps rolling under a gray horizon. At 20 minutes past 9, Commander Waldron rocked his wings. 20 miles on the northwest horizon, massive white wakes curved across the water through the haze, marking the positions of the maneuvering Japanese warships. Ominous gray silhouettes of aircraft carriers and escorting cruisers carved sharp turns against the sea. The enemy fleet was in sight. Waldron did not hesitate. He dipped his left wing and signaled the squadron to close up formation and drop to 50 feet above the waves. We dropped like lead toward the green water, lining up against the entire enemy fleet while the ocean rushed past our bellies at 100 knots. My stomach lurched as all 15 Devastators screamed down toward the sea, flattening out 50 feet above the rolling blue chop. The 2,000-pound Mark 13 torpedo dragged at the airframe like an iron anchor, vibrating through our rudder. Through the salty sea spray, the sky above suddenly tore open as Japanese Zero fighters dove straight out of the high clouds. "Zero's on our tail," Bob Huntington yelled into his throat mic, swinging his twin Brownings around on the scarf ring. Japanese fighters came down out of the sun, cannon barrels winking fire. Bob squeezed the dual spade triggers until his gun hammered violently against the metal rim. Red tracer streams arced into the slipstream as Zero fighters flashed past our tail. The deafening roar of his gun drowned out our engine, and hot brass casings rained from his breech, burning through my flight suit and scorching my shoulders. Off our port wing, Owens's plane took a direct burst of cannon fire and pitched vertically into the sea, throwing up a geyser of white foam. Seconds later, another Devastator exploded into an orange fireball that scattered burning aluminum across the waves. The squadron was disintegrating around us, but we kept plowing forward through the wall of tracer fire. The ocean beneath us turned white, with bullet splashes and exploding heavy naval shells. Plumes of black water 50 feet high erupted around our wingtips as enemy destroyers fired their main batteries directly into the sea to create walls of water to knock us down. Then I saw the skipper's plane. Commander Waldron's left wing caught fire, streaming thick black fuel smoke behind his tail. He stayed level, holding his altitude until his fuel tanks ruptured and flipped his plane into a burning cartwheel that vanished beneath the ocean without a single chute blooming. One by one, the plane numbers on our left and right disappeared. Machine gun fire ripped through fabric control surfaces, turning our formation into trailing streams of smoke and fire. Yet nobody pulled up or broke away. Every remaining pilot held his course straight into the flak. Ahead of us, the massive flight deck of an enemy carrier grew larger by the second, surrounded by a solid wall of bursting black flak. Through the rear bulkhead, I saw our torpedo release linkage jammed tight. I reached for the manual release mechanism and forced it down with all my weight. The torpedo dropped clear. I watched the dark cylinder run toward the carrier, but the ship turned hard, and the torpedo passed harmlessly astern into the wake. Before I could call out, a burst of cannon fire ripped through our cockpit floor. Shrapnel tore into the rear cabin, shattering the glass canopy into flying shards. Bob Huntington slumped forward across his gun mount, his voice coming through the intercom as a faint, broken whisper before slipping into absolute silence. Our twin Wasp engine shuddered violently, spewing black smoke and scalding oil that coated my goggles in a greasy film. I hauled back on the yoke with all my strength, holding the wings level until our belly slammed into the ocean at 90 knots. The impact hit like a brick wall, ripping the wings clean off and driving seawater through the shattered cabin. Sunlight vanished as green seawater flooded the cockpit, dragging the wreckage down like a block of lead. I sliced through my webbing with my knife, kicked free of the sinking tail, and broke through the ocean swell into the blinding sunlight. I dragged in a ragged mouthful of raw air, salt, and burning fuel, gagging and coughing until my throat rawed with the taste of copper. Wiping salt crust from my goggles, I looked around. The sky above was wide and silent, but the roaring line of 15 devastators had vanished. Out of 30 men, 29 were gone. Across the rolling swells, only black patches of burning bunker oil and floating aluminum ribs broke the water. 30 yards away, Bob Huntington's paper flight log bobbed face up in the sea spray, its pages smeared with grease and fresh blood. I thought of my harsh words to him in the locker bay 4 hours ago, and the memory burned hotter than the salt water in my eyes. A floating seat cushion from my cockpit drifted past, and I tucked it under my arms to stay afloat. I reached into my left pocket and closed my fist around the small bronze nut. The hard metal edges bit into my palm, keeping my shivering fingers awake. 3 miles north, the massive wakes of the enemy fleet carved white circles into the blue, their anti-aircraft guns falling quiet. I crouched low in the ocean chop, pulling my black rubber seat cushion over my head whenever an enemy destroyer churned nearby. Salt crust caked around my eyelids, and the relentless tropical heat burned my exposed face as I drifted in the vast oil slicks. Then, near 10:30, the sky high above Nagumo's carriers filled with high-altitude American Dauntless dive bombers. Our desperate low-level torpedo run had drawn many of the Japanese fighters down toward the water, leaving the sky above vulnerable. I could not see clear details through the ocean spray, only sudden, blinding flashes of light on the horizon, followed by giant columns of black soot rising thousands of feet into the blue sky. Heavy thuds vibrated through the seawater around my floating chest. The Japanese carriers Akagi, Kaga, and Soryu were turning into roaring furnaces. Torpedo 8 had paid the ultimate price, but our sacrifice had cleared the path for victory. Columns of dark, oily smoke stretched thousands of feet into the tropical sky, blotting out the noon sun until the water around me turned dark as twilight. By nightfall, the burning enemy hulks drifted like massive torches against the pitch-black sky. I squeezed the cold bronze nut in my bleeding palm through 30 long hours of exposure, fighting off hypothermia, sharks, and hallucinations, until a Navy PBY Catalina flying boat spotted my bobbing cushion, and pulled my oil-soaked body from the ocean on the afternoon of June 5th. When the Catalina's crew pulled me aboard, my skin was raw from hours in salt water. They wrapped me in heavy woolen blankets and offered me a metal cup of hot coffee, but my fingers were locked tight in a rigid fist, still gripping the small piece of brass from my pocket. 40 years have gone by, but the sting of that salt water never leaves my blood. I sit by the open window of my boat repair shop on Galveston Bay, watching the calm Gulf waters turn amber under the evening sun. On the cypress workbench rests that same small bronze nut, its edges smoothed by 4 decades of restless hands. I went into that mission carrying a piece of bronze. I came out carrying the memory of 29 men who never climbed out of those waves.